In this world, guides don't fight. She does. Her spirit is a kraken, born for the deep, built for war. He's an S-class Sentinel. His spirit is an orca. This is not Finding Nemo. Subscribe for daily updates. The sky had been clear for days. No rain. Only a burning sun suspended high above. Smells like Sentinel sweat. Roy lifted a silk handkerchief to his nose and ducked beneath the arched gate. "This place is filthy," he muttered. "I hate coming to military control." The sign above the gate was old, its lettering corroded by time. Beyond the gate, grey parade ground. Sentinels moved in steady streams. On one side, a large screen flickered. A crowd had gathered to watch. Roy spoke quietly. "We're just here to complete the procedure. Once the paperwork's done, we leave. If they ask for anything you don't like, ignore it." A calm reply followed. "Yes." The girl behind him was very young. She wore the formal uniform of the White Tower's Guide Academy. An ivory brocade gown. A white silk blouse threaded with gold. Layers of lace spilled beneath the hem, swaying with every step. She moved through the sunlight in silence. Her posture was composed, her expression restrained. Porcelain skin, delicate features, like a flower untouched by dust. She did not belong here. A guide raised within the White Tower was meant to be sheltered, protected, kept far from heat, blood, and noise. The Sentinels noticed. Conversations faltered. Eyes drifted toward her, then away. Loud voices lowered instinctively. Whispers followed her steps. "That's her," the guide. "The one whose bonded Sentinel broke the contract. Do you think I—" "Don't be ridiculous. What's your rank? Are you noble born? There aren't many guides left. No one wants her anyway." Roy heard enough to feel anger rise. A guide like this, he thought, and he rejected her. Julian Ashford must have lost his mind. When Roy glanced back at her, his expression softened with pity. She must have been hurt badly, he reasoned. Bad enough to volunteer for contaminated zone exploration. Poor girl. But Claire Arden showed no reaction at all. Her face remained calm, almost blank. Her gaze was fixed somewhere distant, toward the far end of the parade ground. Roy followed her line of sight. Iron execution frames stood there, dark, crude, their bases buried deep in the earth. A man hung from one of them, bare-chested, wrists bound above his head, suspended for days. Blackened blood masked half his face. His features were impossible to recognize, but his body told its own story. A young sentinel, one shaped by countless battles. Roy turned to her. "Do you know him?" he asked. Claire withdrew her gaze. She shook her head gently. "I may have seen him before," she said. "I don't remember." They crossed the field and climbed the steps of the administrative building. Near the execution frames, a screen replayed the same footage. Below it stood a strange machine. The device was called the Brain Invade System, a relic from the old world. It extracted residual memories from the dead. What played on the screen was the final memory of a dying man. "Please, I'll give it to you. All of it. It's worth a fortune. Everything is yours. Just let me live." Hands trembled into view, offering a crystal, a priceless energy core. The gun moved closer. Then, vac. Static. The video restarted. Again, and again. A sentinel gasped. An energy crystal, worth a fortune. That size, I've never seen one. No wonder. He slaughtered his entire squad for it. The crowd erupted. "I used to admire him. Blade of the ice fields. Turns out I was blind. Sentence him already." Someone whistled. A muscular sentinel stepped forward until a chill seized his spine. Pressure crashed down on him. Like the deep sea, something vast moved beneath unseen waters. A predator. His legs trembled. Sweat poured down his face. He looked up and met the prisoner's gaze. Cold, sharp, like a blood-stained blade. That was no broken man. S-level sentinel pressure. Already far from the field. Ascending the steps. Claire Arden paused. She turned her head slightly. For just a moment, she thought she heard the sound of waves. It was not until the second-floor office documents submitted that Claire finally remembered. She had heard that ocean sound before. It had been years back when she still wasn't permitted to leave the White Tower. And yet one night, in the middle of heavy snowfall, Claire slipped out anyway. Officially, the Tower Academy had the strongest security system in the Empire. No one entered, no one escaped, not without being noticed. But Claire had always suspected that was only half true, because before any guard could see her, her spirit was already there, threading through the floor like a shadow with fingers. She didn't have to fight or run. All it took was a tiny nudge, barely a flick against the surface of someone's awareness. A soft suggestion. There's nothing to notice. Keep walking. And they did. Teachers, guards, sentries. They stared right past her. Then later couldn't even explain why. Inside the White Tower, it was always spring. Luxury, safety, and a life so polished it didn't even feel real. And for some reason, Claire couldn't stand it. She wanted the cold. Wanted to step into snow that bit through her boots. Wanted air that hadn't been filtered through machines. Wanted a sky that didn't have a roof. So she wandered outside for a while, aimless, invisible, and no one could find her unless she wanted to be found. That night, the snow fell thick and silent. The streets were empty. Claire left the academy in nothing but a thin uniform, then sat down in a narrow alley, leaning against a trash bin piled with snow. She tipped her head back and stared at a small patch of grey sky. And then she heard it. Not footsteps. Not voices. A sound like distant surf, a tide rolling in where there shouldn't have been an ocean at all. The Sentinel appeared almost at the same moment. He dropped onto the metal bin like he'd been waiting above her the whole time, black tactical suit, one boot crushing fresh snow, and a short blade so cold it seemed to steal heat from the air itself. He pressed it to her throat without hesitation. And into his comes, he said, calm and clipped. Target located. Yes, it's her. Fully controlled. Copy. Bringing her in now. When he looked at Claire, there was no awe in his eyes, no instinctive softness guides we're used to. This wasn't a soldier seeing a guide. This was a special operative staring at a runaway who'd caused trouble in the middle of a storm. Controlled. Alert. Not allowing a single opening. The blade stayed steady against her skin. Years later, standing at the second-floor window of the military administration building, Claire touched her throat as the memory snapped into place. So it was him. The clerk in front of her flipped through her paperwork and dragged her attention back to the present. She was a middle-aged woman in uniform, cap on, insignia pinned neatly to her chest. Her expression impatient before she even finished reading. This doesn't look like it follows procedure, she said, turning pages like she was searching for an excuse. Then her fingers stopped. She stared at one section. Wait, you have mental influence listed here. The tone changed instantly. The clerk closed the file, and her smile returned. Too warm. Too practiced. Claire, she said, suddenly familiar. A guide running around outside the tower. It's not a good look. It puts us in a difficult position. Then, smoothly like a trap being disguised as an offer, she added. However, we do have something important. Something we urgently need help with. She tipped her chin toward the window. See that prisoner? The one on the frame? He's a murderer. Her voice lowered. We need a guide to breach his mental barrier, crack him open, make him confess. Roy stiffened beside her, already preparing to argue. And then Claire answered, flat and simple. Fine. Roy turned so fast he almost pulled something. What? He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. This wasn't a normal request. This wasn't even safe. He tried to warn her with frantic eye signals. But Claire didn't notice, because her gaze had drifted past the window again, locked on the screen outside, the one replaying the execution memory on loop, over and over, like the world wanted everyone to memorize the horror. The clerk, meanwhile, looked delighted. She stepped closer to Claire, speaking quietly, almost like sharing a secret. Confession isn't the real priority, she murmured. We need the location of the energy crystal. Her eyes narrowed. She gave a knowing little look. It's priceless. Orders from above. We must retrieve it. She patted Claire's shoulder, as if encouraging a child. Do whatever it takes. If you find where the crystal is, then even if you break him, kill him. She smiled. It won't matter. For a heartbeat, Claire looked at her. Dark eyes. Pale face. Calm, too calm. And then, in the same obedient tone the clerk expected, she said, Understood. Claire Arden stood beneath the execution frame and looked up. The sentinel hanging above her had his head lowered, blood caked across his face. For a moment, she searched her memory. Then the name surfaced. Caleb Cole, yes, that was it. The man above her barely resembled the sentinel she remembered. Years ago, he had worn the black combat uniform of the Sentinel Academy. Clean-faced, sharp-eyed, dangerous in a way that hadn't yet learned restraint. The fabric had clung to a body built for speed and impact. A narrow waist, long legs, black boots crashing down into fresh snow, sending white shards flying into the air. Back then, he had looked like a blade that didn't yet know how to stay sheathed. Now, if not for that sound, Claire would never have connected the two. But every time she heard that sound of imagined waves, something inside her responded. Her psychic tendrils stirred restlessly, coiling, lifting, their small suckers flexing as if eager to reach forward, to explore, to touch, to test what lay beneath. Above her, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Caleb Cole opened his eyes and saw a young woman stepping out from the sea of bodies, walking straight toward him. A guide. She moved with a gentle, unhurried grace, looking almost fragile, as if she carried no threat at all. And yet, the moment he saw her, his heart sank completely. Why her? Of all people, why was it her? Caleb had never truly feared guides. Yes, they were born with the ability to influence sentinels, to reach into places others could not. But he had never believed that someone raised inside the White Tower, pampered, protected, could break into his mental barrier. Not even now. Not even after days of torture had ground him down to the edge of collapse. The problem wasn't the guides. It was the people behind them. If there was any guide in the White Tower he had ever been wary of, it was the one he had encountered years ago. Back then, she had been young, far too young, and yet her mental pressure had been strong enough to make even him uneasy. And now, here she was. And worse, years ago he had offended her badly. Caleb let out a breath that barely qualified as a laugh. Thirst clawed at him violently. They had hung him here for 5 days, without even a single mouthful of water. A pale hand reached up, fingers closed around his jaw, forcing his head up. The touch was firm, decisive. Then, with her other hand, she lifted a cup from the table beside the rack and pressed it to his lips. Water spilled into his mouth. Cool, real, he drank greedily, swallowing every last drop. When the cup emptied, he looked straight at her. Blood coated his face. Dirty hair hung messily over his eyes. He looked utterly ruined. And yet, when he lifted his gaze from beneath that filthy fringe, the look in his eyes was the same as it had been in the snow. Cold, proud, unyielding, like a blade reflecting winter light, feral, sharp, and refusing to break. Claire opened her hand. Her palm settled over his eyes and pressed firmly against his forehead. Without hesitation, she invaded his mental landscape. Inside the mind, the world changed. Claire found herself standing above an ocean. Water stretched endlessly in every direction. Clear blue in the distance, deep emerald, green beneath her feet. The moment she entered the sea, it felt as if she had plunged into a massive, flawless emerald, pure, luminous, dreamlike, beautiful, and terrifying. So this was Caleb Cole's mental barrier. An ocean. Every Sentinel possessed a mental domain. Fragile, private, a place that reflected their inner world and hid memories no one else was meant to see. This was the first time she had ever seen a mental barrier with no edge. The sea was the softest thing in the world, and also the most violent. She felt no fear, only a quiet awareness, as she waited for the moment when the battle would begin. Then she began to swim deeper, descending into the heart of the ocean. The deep was silent, a silence that felt gentle, almost welcoming. It settled around her like a familiar weight, soothing rather than suffocating. From farther below, something stirred. A distant sound drifted upward, faint and unreal. A call that might have belonged to a whale or a fish or something far older than either. An ancient voice of the ocean, and without realizing it, she found herself swimming toward it.